When you think of motoring collaborations, you will likely picture some of the industry's greats like the Mercedes SLR McLaren, the Lotus Carlton, and even things like the new Supra/Z4. While the idea of two companies pouring their best qualities into one car would seem to be foolproof, the Alfa Romeo Arna is an excellent case study as to how this can go so very wrong. Here is its story. It all begins in the late 1970s. It's fair to say that, at the time, Alfa Romeo was not doing well. The Alfa Sud, introduced in 1971, which was intended to turn Alfa around, had not been a great investment for the company. Their factory was operating at well below capacity, and by the time the 1980s rolled around, Alfa Romeo was firmly in the red. They needed a new car to bring them back and set their sights on the lucrative hatchback market. However, the problem was that with such consistent losses over the last decade, it meant that there was very little funding for the project at all, so getting it off the ground would be near impossible. This is where the second half of the collaboration makes its entrance. Around the same time, Nissan was looking to establish a foothold in the European market, which was proving very difficult for them. A lot of European manufacturers and governments were becoming worried about an impending Japanese auto invasion, as the cars from the East were far more reliable and economic than what was being homegrown at the time, and people were going to stop buying European cars altogether. Out of fears for this theoretical endgame, tariffs and other acts were put in place by multiple countries to curtail this takeover. It even reached extremes such as the French government outright banning Japanese imports for a while in 1982, though this wasn't limited to just cars. Things like VCRs also saw a ban. Therefore, if Nissan wanted to enter the European market, they were going to have to do it in a bit of a backdoor way. And so, with both companies facing problems, the ill-fated Alfa Romeo-Nissan alliance was born. Alfa Romeo would gain access to Nissan's tech and funding, while Nissan had a solid inroad to the European market through Alfa. In October of 1980, a deal was signed by Nissan president Takahashi Ishihara and Alfa Romeo president Ettore Masachese. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. God. And a joint venture called Alfa Romeo Nissan Auto Vecchioli. Alfa Romeo Nissan Auto Vecchioli, or ARNA for short, was conceived. The deal was even endorsed by the Italian Prime Minister at the time. Alfa Romeo was partly state-owned, so he of all people would also like to see a sales increase for the brand. A new factory was also opened in Naples. The question was, how could it fail? And so, with the new company formed, work began on creating this new world-beating hatchback to take on titans like the Volkswagen Golf. In all honesty, it would seem to be a match made in heaven. The world-renowned Japanese reliability and economy being married to the iconic Italian design language that Alfa Romeo had shown to have perfected in their past, this really was going to be a special car. But this is motoring monstrosities, so obviously it was not going to be special for the right reasons. What resulted can only be described as backwards. The Alfa Romeo Arna, which borrowed the acronym of the very company it was born from, was heavily based on the Japanese market Nissan Cherry. The Cherry had previously seen some great success in not only its home country, but the UK too. Despite only selling around 6,000 units in 1971, by 1972 this number would have exploded to 30,000. But Nissan knew that their name alone on a popular car wouldn't be able to take the wider European region, and so the Cherry was chosen as the platform for an Alfa Romeo rebadging. Now, I'm not a car designer or a mechanic, but if I was put in charge of this project, I would likely keep everything underneath the exact same. The engine, the transmission, the gearbox, the brakes, you name it. However, I would allow Alfa Romeo to do the styling and design of everything that was non-mechanical. They could even perhaps implement their own sporty mechanics if there was ever a sporty model down the line, an Arna GTI if you will, but on the whole, Nissan handles the mechanics and Alfa handles the looks. Well, as you can guess, that's not what happened. Alfa Romeo would take the Cherry and then fit their own engine ripped straight from the cult favourite Alfa Sud, as well as their own transmissions, steering, front brakes and front suspension. All pretty important stuff, let's face it. And best of all, the car would be fitted with an Italian electrical system, something that's renowned for going wrong a small, 100% of the time. Nissan was allowed to keep their own rear brakes and rear suspension, however. While the Arna project was filled with hope from people from both sides of the alliance, it was quickly realised that, actually, it was quite terrible. Featuring Alfa's remarkably unreliable engine and mechanics, not to mention a real problem with Alfa-related rusting and shoddy build quality, being partnered with the almost non-existent design of Nissan's body and reportedly shocking handling that was notorious with Japanese cars at the time, it was clear to see that the Arna had been designed and built the wrong way around. However, the project was nearing completion, and so it was going to market whether it was fit for it or not. And at the 1983 Frankfurt Motor Show, the Arna would be shown to the world for the first time, touted as the similarly sized but ultimately lower priced version of the then newly released Alfa Romeo 33. And that was pretty clear from the outset. While the 33 had its own set of problems, of course it did, it's an Alfa, it was at least pleasurable to look at. The Arna looked like it was made out of old clay. Throughout its run, the Arna would see 3 engines, a 1.2, a 1.3 and a 1.5, all Alfa's own boxer design carried straight over from the Alfa Sud. The 1.2, making a paltry 62 horsepower, was fitted from launch. The 1.3, launched in 1984 for the Arna TI, would make a more respectable 85 horsepower, and later TI models would be fitted with the 1.5, now producing a practically inhumane 94 horsepower. The TI model, which ended up being the top trim level of the Arna, would also be sold as the Nissan Cherry Europe GTI. To say that it had a poor launch was probably an understatement. The Arna quickly fostered a reputation of poor build quality, unreliability and abysmal handling among many other things, and sales suffered. The model was only able to shift 53,000 units over its production cycle in Europe. To be quite honest, it's understandable. Why would someone want an unreliable car that looks like a Nissan when they could just, buy a Nissan? And so the TI was discontinued in 1986 and the model in its entirety was dead by 1987, killed off as quickly as it had emerged just 4 years earlier. The Alfa 33 was now intended to cover the lost market share that was once held by the Arna, though this was obviously a very small amount of market share. The whole ordeal, originally designed to bring Alfa out of the red and give Nissan a ticket to Europe, had left both companies looking worse off than before. Alfa Romeo especially was hemorrhaging money and was put up for sale in 1986, and after negotiations with Ford of all companies, was eventually bought out entirely by Fiat, a deal which has remained largely intact until today, recently morphing into the Stellantis group along with brands like Peugeot and Chrysler. It's been a rocky road since 1986, but this move ultimately saved Alfa Romeo from death. As for Nissan, well, they ended up doing alright. In 1984, the Nissan manufacturing plant UK was opened in Sunderland in the north of England, which went on to produce models like the Bluebird, the quite horrible Almera, and the immensely successful Qashqai. Because these cars were built in the UK, there was no need for importation, and Nissan was gifted with their European ticket after all. What the Arna proves is the idea of playing to your strengths. If Nissan had managed the underpinnings and Alfa everything else, the story would have likely gone very differently. A good indication of how this would have played out is the Triumph Acclaim, a joint venture between British Leyland and Honda. It was largely based on the unsurprisingly reliable underpinnings of the Honda Ballade, and it went on to be one of Britain's best-selling cars during its even shorter production run between 1981 and 1984.
The Triumph Acclaim, totally equipped to triumph.
And it even laid the groundwork for later Euro-Japanese collaborations like the Rover 200. While in the end I wouldn't call the Alfa Romeo Arna the worst car from ever, far from it, I would say that it certainly has to be a token example of missed potential. Thank you so much for watching, with a very special thanks to Ben Wright and Brum Brum Bryn, who are very generously donating at the highest tier on my Patreon. Just £1 a month is an amazing help, and I also have socials which are linked in the description below. Again, thank you for watching and take care.